Good morning, Dan and Amy. Good interview by the Hoover Institution of Condi Rice, who is now the head of the Hoover Institution, talking about her perspective on China, particularly as part of the George W. Bush administration during the SARS outbreak and what that was like dealing with the Chinese during that outbreak.
One of the unfortunate similarities is it was also hard to get information out of China during the SARS outbreak. We knew that something had happened. It was very hard to get answers out of China of what had happened. And that is unfortunately a recurring pattern this time around. And it's probably the most troubling aspect of this crisis. Now, it is in the nature of the Chinese system, an authoritarian system, that control of information is power. Control of the narrative is power. So we shouldn't be surprised that when this outbreak happened in Wuhan, they silenced the young physicians and medical students who were trying to sound the alarm. Can you imagine those people being silenced in the United States or in any country, in Germany or Brazil? No, somebody would have picked up the story in the press. It would have been known that there was a problem. But the Chinese did what authoritarians do. They gathered, they silenced those who were trying to sound the alarm, and they wanted to have time to develop the narrative that would be blessed by the Communist Party of China, which means it probably had to go all the way to Beijing before you could say anything.
So that's what they did, and that's what they're trying to do. And Condi Rice develops their process for developing disinformation that we need to deal with now at present.
The Chinese are going to try to create, they're even trying to do this now, a counter-narrative. Well, when we found out about it, we got on top of it. Look at how quickly, through social distancing and quarantine, look how quickly we recovered. And oh, by the way, we've been helping the rest of the world by sending PPEs and by sending help and aid to all of the world. They're going to try to shift the narrative from their initial responsibility for not fessing up to what was happening to we got on top of it and then we helped the rest of you. That's how they're going to try to shift the narrative. Don't let it happen.
So how do we not let it happen, particularly when you have, the likes of Fareed Zakaria saying blaming China doesn't accomplish anything. Don't forget the Soviet Union helped fight smallpox. Huh?
Oh, please.
For more on this, we're pleased to be joined by Lieutenant Colonel Jim Carafano, Vice President of the Catherine and Shelby Cullum Davis Institute for International Studies at the Heritage Foundation, author of books including Wiki at War, Private Sector Public Wars. Jim, thanks for joining us.
Hey, let me ask you, if you guys are Chicago's Morning Answer, how come all you ever do is ask questions?
Hey.
It's a great one. It's one of those metaphysical questions. You know what? You should be at the task force briefings as a member of the press corps with those kind of questions. It's genius. So we rely on people like you, experts, to give us answers. So what's the answer? How do we do what Condi says we need to do, which is don't let them create this alternative narrative? And again, part of the challenge is dealing with a significant percentage of the D.C. press corps that's inadvertently, I'll grant them, helping the Chinese with their disinformation.
Well, first of all, I think it's great to see Secretary Rice back at Hoover and leading Hoover. It's great for the institution, great for the conservative movement, really great for America. She's just such a thoughtful and serious person. I think it's beyond narrative. Here's the point. The head of Vodafone, one of the major telecom leaders in Western Europe, today said, look, we have to buy Chinese 5G because we just really don't have an alternative. So despite all the evidence, the kinds of things that these are not reliable partners in the world. And it's not about, just, the narrative. It's about people who don't get it and are just willing to roll over to the Chinese. And so I think we're way beyond just it's all about just PR here. This is a serious power struggle. And if we don't take this extremely seriously, the struggle, the power, not just the story, we're going to lose.
Yeah, but we have to make them pay for what they've done. And for, sitting on the information, for not, allowing people to celebrate the Chinese New Year, then people to travel all over the world. I mean, besides lives that are lost, livelihoods have been lost too. and it's time for them to, for us to take action against them.
So I think there's really three things. I wrote a piece on this coming out in Fox that the practical, realistic things that we can really do right now, which will make a tremendous difference. And the number one thing actually is just what Secretary Rice talked about, which is transparency. The more that we reveal what the Chinese are doing, the more responsible people are going to make responsible decisions. I really believe that. The second one is economically. The best way to hurt the Chinese economically is we need to look at ourselves at the federal, state, and local level and say, why is it hard for people to do business in America? And this administration's been great about taking off red tape and tax and everything else, but we need to really think about why can't people do business here? Make it easier for people to do business here. And the other is we're never going to make everything in America. So we really have to do a better job, I think, about going out and finding the global partners to trade with, which are more reliable, more resilient, and who we can do business with. I think those are the kinds of things, the serious things in the marketplace that really will get the Chinese attention. And people have to realize, too, is that China is not on the march here. Their economy has taken a huge hit. And despite what some Yahoo is saying, restating Chinese propaganda, the Chinese brand globally has never been more damaged. And I think now is the time really to leverage the free world, which I think is a term that's coming back. The free world saying, we cannot let China run wild and think that the free world is always going to be free. I think that's the main message people need to take away from this.
Well, and then it seems to me there's not, a single silver bullet here. It's taking them on and imposing costs from every which direction. I mean, including even something like Marsha Blackburn's legislation to strip China of foreign sovereign immunities so that you could have Americans sue in courts to seek compensation if they've suffered harm resulting from China's role in spreading the virus. Now, this is going to be like 9/11 families, victims suing Saudi Arabia. You're never going to have those judgments be enforced, but it still is signal sending about, we know you're a culpable party, and we're going to continue to come up with ways to profile your culpability so that this doesn't fade into the background.
Yeah, now you sound exactly like the president. I mean, that's a page out of the president's trade book, which he's really focused on from the start, is how do you push back on China? And the answer is every way where they're trying to take advantage of you, whether it's political, economic, diplomatic, military, legal. Challenge China, because China unchallenged will just run rampant. But they're not 10 feet tall. If you push back on China, I think people are going to come to the American side. I think that's just the reality.
And when you see Britain say no way to Huawei, that's something too. So I mean, there are countries that, despite what you said about those,
right,
we don't have another choice. There are countries that are saying, well, if we don't feel like we have another choice, we're going to find another choice because we're not doing business with this group.
Yeah, I think that's right. I think that's going to be one of the big stories. We really expect that the UK had decided initially that they were going to allow Huawei, which is the Chinese telecom company, to build 30% of their backbone of their 5G telecom system. I think everybody thinks they're going to reverse that decision. Just say that the Chinese are feckless and they just can't be a partner for us.
Sorry, stepping on your toes. Why do you
Sure,
think the Chinese came out with new death numbers? Are they trying to make sure that we don't defund the WHO, or they came out with all of a sudden now they've got 1,500 more people who died from COVID-19 that they forgot to count the first time?
Yeah, it doesn't really fix the narrative, because when you lay down all the numbers, as the president did the other night, pointed out the other night in the nightly brief, the pattern of their disease outbreak and deaths is so out of sync with everybody else in the world, only matched by Iran and North Korea, which is, so you have three incredibly authoritarian regimes who claim that miraculously they have way lower numbers of infected and dead people than everybody else in the world. Nobody believes that, except maybe the yahoos who are
Tom Friedman
at the World Health Organization.
Tom Friedman probably believes it. He's still holding.
I got to tell you,
he wants to be more. He wants us to be more like China. Yeah.
I watched the Global Citizen concert on Saturday night, which first of all I thought was a lousy concert, but I thought that was unbelievably tone deaf. Essentially, to be championing the World Health Organization, which is demonstrably failed. Nobody says we don't need a World Health Organization. Nobody says we shouldn't support the World Health Organization. But the notion that somehow we shouldn't hold them accountable and we shouldn't demand transparency, that is unbelievably tone deaf. And that to be, on one hand, championing medical people who are out there risking their lives every day, and on the other hand, lauding an organization that put those people in risk to begin with. I just thought that was one of to me, the most surreal moments that I've ever experienced from a bunch of people who really ought to know better. But, shamelessly, it just seems that, whatever Trump is for, they have to be against. That's just the definition of reality for them.
Where's Bob Geldof when you need him? H.R. McMaster has a piece in The Atlantic, How China Sees the World. And he starts with the point of how we view China, sort of the foreign policy establishment has viewed China for the last 40 years, really, since the heady days of Deng Xiaoping, he writes in the late 70s, the assumptions. And it seems to me this is important because we have to start from a new set of assumptions if we're going to get to the right conclusions. He writes this. After being welcomed into the international political and economic order, China would play by the rules, open its markets, privatize its economy. As the country became more prosperous, the Chinese government would respect the rights of its people and liberalize politically. And those assumptions have proven to be wrong. And so now we have to have a whole new set of assumptions if we want to make better policy vis-a-vis China.
Well, first of all, HR is a good friend, and he's also a brilliant analyst. His national security strategy he wrote with the President of the United States is still the guiding light of national security policy. For national security advisors later, it's always been tough on China. McMaster and the President actually continue to talk, which I think is a real credit to the President of the United States that he listens to this brilliant guy. I think this article is really very sobering. And again, to see people really continue to embrace this alternative reality of international organizations are fine. We shouldn't pay attention to the thousands of Chinese communist employees that are in these organizations, bending them to the will of the Beijing government. We should just ignore all that and listen to songs by Alicia Keys. They're just living in an alternative reality.
Well, and he talks about the three-pronged approach that China has internally and, importantly, and maybe not emphasized enough, externally: co-option, coercion, and concealment. Those are the three prongs of the Chinese communists' approach to everything. And so that necessarily means, to the point you were getting at, we need to look at our relationship between Chinese nationals and American academics, for example. Maybe we need to think about the admittance to American colleges, universities of people connected to the Chinese communists in in positions of authority in China. Those sorts of things that we haven't talked about a lot maybe need to bubble up to the surface now.
Well, they come under something called, this is a key strategic tool called reciprocity. What we have let the Chinese done is we have given them everything, and they have given us nothing. Their students can come here and do whatever they want. Anybody that goes to China is under strict control. Chinese can invest in anything they want to here. You go to China, you have to play by China's rules. You have to give them their intellectual property, give them seats on their board. We need to stop that. We let them send 1 million diplomats here. They let us send 1 diplomat there. We take their phone calls. Nobody takes our phone calls. So, and this is something the administration has started even before COVID-19, which is we need to treat China like for like. If they disrespect us, we need to disrespect them. And so I think, not just in academia and Hollywood and all these other places, not just in government, but the private sector, we need to start wising up and recognizing that, the Chinese are taking advantage of it. As Newt Gingrich once looked into the Chinese ambassador as great, he pointed fingers, I don't blame you. If I were you, I'd do exactly this. If I could take advantage of America, I'd do it too. We're stupid for letting you get away with it. I think we really need to wise up to that.
He is Lieutenant Colonel Jim Carafano, VP of the Catherine and Shelby Cullum Davis Institute for International Studies at the Heritage Foundation. Jim, thanks as always for joining us. Appreciate it.
Thanks for having me.
Thanks. And he joined us on our turnkey.pro answer line.
The more you listen, the more you'll know. This is Chicago's Morning Answer. Morning Answer on AM 560. The Answer.
After 25 years of building websites for all kinds of companies in many different industries, AmericanEagle.com realized a well-designed website is also your best employee, bringing efficiency, revenue, production, showing up every day, giving above and beyond to increase your bottom line. That's what a website designed, developed, and hosted by AmericanEagle.com has brought to so many clients. An AmericanEagle.com website is a 24/7 branding exercise, building rapport and thus brand equity while you sleep. Companies like WeatherTech have relied on AmericanEagle.com's website design and development and hosting capabilities for years. When some of the world's top brands need a reliable company to prepare their sites for high-traffic events, who do they call? AmericanEagle.com. Their clients have come